Hello all, welcome to Shatter Our Souls, and today we've got a doozy. So, let's be real. At this point in time, I'm doing a lot of cleanup, tidying up the loose ends, and in general, making it so that anything and everything that can be completed without the use of weapons, conventional weapons, is done before I start fiddling with more direct or chaotic stuff. And that means that I'm going to be going from one region to the next, focusing very heavily on the combat shrines and trials that I've been ignoring for the majority of the game. Now, in reality, I should have been doing these as they came, at least to the best of my ability. I couldn't necessarily do the major tests of strength very early on, but the moderate ones, by all means. So today is going to be a lot of combat. And I want to kind of dive into what changed. Because I believe, in part, that if you analyze what changed, what made it easier, harder, or anything in between, that it becomes more reasonable for the player to really dive into and explain, hey, yeah, this is what was going on. So, back when I had first started this challenge, I had this underlying expectation that beating each of the various shrines was going to be possible for the most part, and I just kind of had to figure out how it worked. What would be the best approach for many of these challenges as a whole. And reality is I had absolutely no idea. I just kind of ran at it because, well, the theory is there. I just need to actually be able to back it up in practice. So I kind of went about everything as a try it, see what happens, and walk away from it at a later date, and come back it when I get a chance, as a, hey, yeah, maybe I missed something here. Maybe I needed this. Maybe I should have done that. And so, I kind of dug myself a little bit of a hole here, as some of these shrines are very obviously doable from an earlier point in the game than I would have done them, or than I am doing them. An example being the Swinging Flames, which is intended to be completed with bows. Emphasis on intended. Now, as I'm sure you probably know, this is not your average run-of-the-mill run of Breath of the Wild. Everything I'm doing is with the intention of I am doing it without the use of weaponry. Because using standard weapons, to me, is one of the things that makes Breath of the Wild's combat system so unique, but also one of the reasons why the combat system in and of itself becomes so easy so early on. It can, after beating about 40-ish shrines, be possible to beat 90% of the shrines without batting an eye. Complete virtually anything the game has to throw at you with no issue whatsoever. And I realized that if I wanted a game to be harder, I had to make it artificial. I had to do it in a way that broke the convention of the game and how it worked to begin with. Ergo, the no or minimum weapons run. The idea being beat it with whatever I happen to have that could work. Now, for the most part, that usually has meant bombs, because bombs are pretty much the universal solution for this. You have an enemy you have to fight, well, bombs can do damage to them. Magnesis was another option, but more or less focusing exclusively on the runes. And then, of course, most of this came up to the fact that I'm trying to do things unconventionally. And so, what I initially expected to be a incredibly challenging run quickly changed into something that was much more ordinary, much more consistent, much more run-of-the-mill. And I'm not really sure that was what my intent was. See, I had always had this mentality of, oh, yeah, we become reliant on the tools we've gained throughout the game, and Eventide Island shows it. But Eventide Island's whole challenge was around the fact that they took away everything, armor included. Your odds and ends, your food, your monster parts were all gone. And so the idea was, oh, very simply, just go ahead, find what you need to find, defeat a couple enemies, and that was it. And people started using tools and, oh, I'm going to break the game by opening up this section of the map really quickly or pulling this item out of my inventory so that I can have armor on during Eventide and stuff like that. It became a question of how badly can we break the game. And that to me is disingenuous. There's so much more that the game has to offer. Now, was taking everything away and throwing bombs at every enemy the solution? Probably not. But I would argue that by going this route, by fighting everything with the most traditional, the most average tools that I could get, is important. Because it shows that the game can be beaten in virtually any way, as long as you are patient. And patient is the key word here, because my goodness, this takes forever. Anyways, with all of that, the combat system of Breath of the Wild, in and of itself, generally relies on I am going to do damage consistently. My enemies are going to try to bonk me, try to do damage back, and they are going to get stopped in their track. Whether that is by the fact that you are playing with using your perfect bullet time dodges, arrows, every little bit of something that your enemies try to throw back at you is going to get thrown back at them. And for this side of things, for the I'm going to beat every enemy back with bombs run, it comes a lot more about finding openings. Enemies in older Zeldas, I'm going to point at Ocarina of Time and the whatchamacallits, the Stalfos warriors. The Stalfos warriors always ended up being a harder enemy because it was about trying to find your opportunities to do damage to an enemy that otherwise was pretty well blocked, pretty well defended. And when you're dealing with bombs, your enemies have this moment of, oh wait, they're throwing a bomb at me, I should get out of the way. And so you end up with this, oh, backing off, we're gonna wait for a moment. And I know that's kind of part of the whole expectation there, because of course it is. Enemies are intended to do things in a certain way to defend themselves. If they didn't, well, things would be a very different game, right? But in the same breath, the same vein, it became about, well, what opportunities can I exploit? Now, looking at the little guardian here, the spear is the one that I can exploit the best, because it only has one major attack, and that is its stabby motion. And if it only has the stabby motion, then I can, every time it loads up to attack me with the spear, sidestep, bomb, sidestep, bomb, sidestep, bomb. Same thing with the sword. The axe, on the other hand, is much wider, much longer reaching, and has a double attack motion. The axe, ironically, has the most time to attack back, but the least amount of defensive capability. Sorry, the least amount of room for error compared to the other two weapons that these Guardians have. When it comes to the Hinoxes, it's very much about running away and waiting for them to make the move, waiting for them to make the oopsie. Because if they make the mistake, then you're able to come in and do damage to them under whatever normal circumstances that might come up your way. Now, reality is this the way to go? I have no idea. But I argue that at the very least, we have a start of a formula, a start of a plan. Now, to be clear, I don't necessarily think that any given circumstance is 100% completable without taking damage or even without losing to these guys. I think that these guys are way too well armored that it becomes a battle of attrition. It becomes a battle of patience. Can I outlast my enemy? And reality is absolutely I can. That's not a problem. Outlasting these guys is simple. But actually being able to best them in a trial of combat is something entirely different. Now, these lovely monstrosities are generally take 3-ish forms. There's the minor, the moderate, and the major. And they each have 3 phases depending on how much health they have. Phase 1 is always about till half HP, where they will fight you mano-a-mano with everything they've got. Phase 2, they'll start doing the helicopter spin. Now the helicopter spin is when our damage actually doubles. Because now we're able to deal more precise damage by doing bombing runs with them, by flying over the enemy and dropping bombs and blowing them up as we fly over. The final stage is what I would like to call the cannon stage. These guys will sit in place and wait for you to, and will charge up a single shot. These shots are intended to be massive and hard-hitting. And yeah, 100% they are. But these massive hard-hitting shots also take about 3 seconds to charge up. So you have 3 to 4 seconds of non-stop damage dealing. I can usually get 3 to 4 bombs in before it shoots back at me. Perfect? No. Reasonable? Absolutely. Is this going to be a trend? Absolutely. And so, for me, these guys started as insurmountable, difficult to deal with, and became something that I could rather easily take down. It wasn't a matter of, how long, it wasn't a matter of difficulty. It was a matter of how much time was I willing to throw at these enemies to make sure I had what I needed. And how much time I'm willing to throw at them is whatever it takes. Now, reality dictates that every single one of these enemies is going to be much more difficult than others. Or some of them have the capability of being more difficult than others. And that is intentional. Okay, wow, this is taking a long time. Hoofty. It is intentional to do it in this way because I believe that every single time I sit down and I rip into these guys, try to do damage and push back my opponents, I'm really doing myself a favor, trying to make everything work out nicely. Anywho, Big Bad Evil Guy number 1 is almost to the cannon form. Once cannon form starts, we're in the clear for fighting this guy. Effectively, once they set aside and say, okay, I'm gonna shoot and pelt these guys from afar, that is the moment we have won. And that's a really finite circumstance to come to, but also kind of proves my point, that these guys are easier than I might have otherwise anticipated. And come on, we're almost there. one more bomb. Let's see what this one does. And nope, not that one. And so, yeah. Anywho, we're gonna finish this guy off the way we know best, which is by throwing endless bombs at this guy until he knows that he is defeated. Now, generally speaking, at this point, you run. Once the circles all converge to a central point, you don't continue to try attacking them. And we got 3-4 more bombs in. For a minor test, we can usually do this in 2 cycles. Moderate, I believe, just barely takes 3. Major takes 3.5 to 4. And while that is, very loose tie into their health totals, it also is a guesstimation of how much more health each individual version has. And the moderates have about double the health of the original, and the majors have double to triple the health of the moderates, meaning you're always going to be significantly better off dealing with your enemies as fast as you can in the higher ends. Especially, oh wow, 6, cool. Yeah, this is a lot more health than I remembered. Cool. Anyways, so overall, where does all of this leave me? We've finally beaten one of these major tests of strength. How many do I have total? By my recollection, there are, I think, between 8 and 12 of these major tests of strength. And having beaten one of them, yeah, absolutely, we can do it. Every single one of them I feel has to be done on camera, because if I don't do it on camera, it might be construed that I didn't do it with the tools that I have in mind. But that's just me being a little persnickety about it. Anyways, with our big bad evil guy defeated, we're gonna go fight another one. And this is kind of where I gotta admit, the combat of Breath of the Wild is fantastic. It's fun, it's enjoyable, but when you start taking away the tools that make the game's combat more unique, more interesting, the bows, the swords, the boomerangs, the shields, the everything, it really starts to end up being very formulaic. Oh, yep, he's attacking me, step back, throw a bomb. Oh, he's attacking me, step back, throw a bomb. And I don't necessarily think it's something wrong with the developers. I think the developers did a fantastic job making this game. I think that I'm just playing it in a way that is not intended to be played this way. Now, reality dictates that this run has been kind of a test of patience. Every single enemy, every single boss, every single shrine has been a challenge of what is actually possible with these tools that I have on hand. And reality is that for the most part, a lot of these tools that I have on hand really leave a lot to be desired. The magnesis being what I personally consider the most versatile tool only does so much when you're stuck in a situation where every time you enter a shrine, you're left with nothing to actually bring in with you. And most shrines don't have enough, or don't have anything made of metal to use as a shield to begin with. To use in a combative sense at all. Is that intentional? Probably. But then, as soon as you leave the shrine that you were in, your metal object you were using as a magnesis tool also disappears. So, even if you had a solution, a way of going about it that made sense, that worked for the circumstances, you're still left with feeling frustrated or stuck in this situation that could have been very easy. Anywho, each region has kind of had its own kind of tie-in challenge for me. Most of them have been just, hey, can I traverse this area without getting in too much trouble? And for the most part, I think I did a pretty good job avoiding getting in trouble. The Akala region was pretty straightforward. The region around Zora's domain was a little more difficult than I would have liked, just because most of the enemies had electric-based attacks in a region that was designed around water, which is not exactly the easiest to get away from. The Central Hyrule was, ironically, probably one of the easiest and hardest regions. It was absolutely massive, and I wanted to do it all in one sitting, but couldn't. Doing each area in one go was my original hope. That I would play through and beat every single shrine in each region of the game before moving on to the next one. Doing the entirety of the Great Plateau one day, the entirety of the Gerudo Desert the next. How about the Highlands? How about the Tabantha region? Every time I picked up the controller, I wanted to do another region. And I expected that my cleanup region, the cleanup of all of my missions or attempts, would be around episode like 16. That it was going to take me about 4 months, give or take, to go through the game properly end to end. Oh, how naive I was. See, the reality of it is that I was trying to beat a open world game in a way that it was never intended to be beaten. In a way that the game was pushing back against consistently. Now, to be fair, if I could sit down and do every single side quest, every single mission of each region in one sitting, I mean, I could. But it would be an incredibly hard task, especially knowing that certain circumstances within the entirety of Zelda as a whole kind of doesn't work 100%. Yeah, I overextended myself there, that hurt. Anyways, with all of that, I ended up kind of becoming reliant on certain tools. Focusing in on trying to beat certain sections in this way or that was kind of the goal, was the point of each attempted region. But after trying to complete, I think it was the region around Kakariko Village, I started going to a more 30-minute episodic formulaic nature, because I realized that I was making full feature-length movies every single week. And feature-length movies of an hour and a half is just too much to cram into 1 week, for me at least. So, I stepped back a little bit. And by stepping back, I quadrupled the length of the series. Which, on one hand, fine, no big deal. On the other hand, could have been done in a slightly more reasonable way. Now, at this point, I was looking into the shrine on the missing shrine on the edge of the Gerudo Highlands. Now, this shrine was intended to be a major test of strength, and one that I had known from the very beginning as being a major test of strength. I knew that simply getting over to it and fighting the enemy itself wasn't going to be that hard of a solution. I had just, after all, blitzed a major test of strength less than 20 minutes ago. I could do this. So I went about my day and went, oh yeah, I can do that, fire it off, and went to go off in the races. This is just my, hey, I'm heading in that direction type of situation because, well, I have to have something to break up the monotony of combat. And honestly, at this point in time, I was realizing that 90% of the shrines I missed are outright impossible. The perfect timing shrine in the south end of Gerudo Desert, where you're effectively trying to get a Sheikah orb to fall in a platform down below, and the orb is on conveyors. That's not possible under my current rule set. If I could bring a shield with, maybe, but under what I'm doing and what I'm capable of, I can't do that. So what's my next option? Well, next option was pretty well, I could wind bomb myself up to the top. And to be clear, this is possible. Wind bombs are more than reasonable solution provided you have the skills to use it. I simply don't. The second option, which I think is much more reasonable in my mind, is the act of using tools such as, bows to beat it. But the solutions that are possible for me at this exact second in time are not possible for me as a player. Now, most shrines are completable using only magnesis. Game Champ 3000 kind of proved this in the pauseless run. But the thing is that the pauseless run, magnesis was the de facto, this is what I've got to use. Magnesis was their main solution. They had access to bows, swords, shields, everything under the sun. So it was more reasonable for Game Champ 3000 to do the pauseless run, just because, well, you're not constantly switching back and forth between bombs. But the thing is that even using bombs and, to an extent, wind bombs is very much a possibility for many individuals. And I know that many people have broken this game in ways that I could scarcely imagine. And I think part of the whole situation is that as players, we end up getting ourselves into one of a number of camps. I've mentioned this a few times. There are those that become speedrunners, that try to break the game in such a way that they can shave off a couple more seconds. These are players that have played the game front to back, time after time after time. These players are very well versed. There's the casual players that will play whatever they want to play. They'll go hunt some Koroks, they'll go do a few shrines, beat up some enemies for 20 minutes, save and pick up the game a week and a half later wondering what was the next thing I was wanting to do. The people that play more casually are still very much gamers, but they're ones that play the game for fun. When the game stops being fun, they stop playing the game. Players that are completionists, speedrunners, or challenge runners tend to play games knowing full well that what they are doing is not the intended way to play the game. And for those individuals, how they approach the game is, in many ways, shapes, and form, fun for them. The challenge itself is part of the goal, the interest, the drive. But for me, I'm somebody who likes to approach games as a challenge runner. I like to be the guy who says, hey, I could do this, but could I? I have to prove it. Now, as an entity, as an individual who knows, yeah, I could probably do that, how far can I go? What are my current limitations? What would I have to learn to get farther? These are the standard questions that I ask myself anytime I pick up a controller with the drive of becoming a, shall we say, a challenge or completing some ludicrous task within a video game. What am I actually capable of doing? And so, for me, when I say I'm not a speedrunner, it is that I do not have the patience necessary to break a game over my knee. To be able to say, yeah, I could beat it in this way by doing this series of tasks or events in a very particular order, in a very specific way, because I know that I can get a few extra frames out of this. I am typically a completionist. A player who picks up a game and says, I'm going to play it in this way for this amount of time. I am going to attempt to complete this side mission over here with this goal in mind. I am going to complete this and do that. I am going to play this same RPG 7 times over because that one odd RPG has a particular event focused on the friendship status of every character in the party, and every individual party member has a different event tied to this one odd event. Bonus points if you can tell me what that event actually is, and what game it's from. But the result of that is that I play games perhaps more often or more consistently than I would otherwise, than most people would play otherwise. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing, quite the opposite. I love these games, and when I play a game to true completion, it is not because I think that it is a boring game. It is because I want to get every little piece of information, every single bit out of it as I can. But video games aren't supposed to be stressful. If trying to complete a game is too much, don't worry about it. My reality is that I am the type of player who tries to play games in different ways and tries to work around certain limitations because I personally enjoy breaking limitations. I personally enjoy playing games in weird ways because why else would I do it? That's not a problem for everybody. That's not something for everybody. And the instant that we acknowledge that it's not for everybody is the instant that gamers as a whole can start to kind of tie up a few loose ends and problems that we have with one another. Ow. That was my face, sir. Anywho. Now that we are in yet another major test of strength, it looks like I've got probably 3 of them to do more today. These guys are a little bit on the harder side. It's not that they're overbearing or difficult. It is simply that they are exhausting. They are meant to fight you for a length of time that far exceeds the typical play of fighting these guys. Typically, under ordinary circumstances, fighting a major test of strength is supposed to be about a 2 to 3 minute ordeal. But these guys, doing it in the way I have been, are typically 10 to 15 minutes or longer of just throwing bombs at them. And yes, exhausting as it may be, that's kind of the point. It's a battle of attrition. Who will outlast the other? Will it be Link with his endless supply of bombs? Or will it be the robot with an absurdly high health bar? Ultimately, the choice is yours. Hey, you almost stabbed me in the face, sir. Now, if I'm being honest, this version of Link Now, this specific version, the version that I am playing, is far weaker than the standard Link. If you were to take Breath of the Wild's main play Link and put him up against Mr. Kaboom Link, Mr. Kaboom Link would be absolutely obliterated by a Link with any degree of armor, tools, and weapons at his disposal. And it's kind of a sad situation to think that it is that easy for this particular Link to beat the game, if only as a battle of attrition. The other Link would absolutely obliterate this guy. And it's not really even all that close. When you start looking at how much damage a bomb does, a bomb deals about, I believe it's something like 5 to 10 points of damage per strike. More than the most basic attacks do in Breath of the Wild with like sticks and stones, but far less than your standard weapons. And you end up with weapons like the Royal Guard Claymore, which can do 70 damage in a single hit. It does not matter how hard this little Link pushes himself. He is not going to outdo that level of raw strength. Couple that with this Link is incapable of getting any of the 4 Divine Beast powers. The 4 champion powers, if you will. And the other guy has all of them? Yeah, this Link is hoopla. And the reality is that I think that this Link would struggle in a duel against anybody. Now, something that I've been wanting to do for a while is actually compare the characters of the various games that have shown up on this channel. And to be clear, I'm talking their absolute full strength. The versions of the character at their peak. The version that has the absurdly powerful bow, the Master Sword, a couple of claymores, 7 different Hylian shields. This version of Link that I'm referring to being the apex of raw power in this universe. This Link is meant to be absurdly powerful. But if you compare the standard Link to most basic video game characters, you'll find that Link really struggles with pushing himself. He has a habit of overextending himself in ways that I don't think most players would ever really consider a problem. See, how do I want to word this? Link from Breath of the Wild has kind of 3 major problems that really define his character in a negative light. First and foremost, he is heavily reliant on his gear, which, to be clear, every Link is. He didn't get the title of the Swiss Army knife of gaming for nothing. But more than him just having an absurd amount of gear that he relies upon, Link from Breath of the Wild also has an absurd number of weapons, an absurd number of skills and abilities. And when you start talking about those abilities, specifically the champion's powers, it becomes undeniable that Link would absolutely be destroyed by most enemies in Breath of the Wild without much cause for alarm. And that's a problem. This Link has capabilities. This Link is more than capable of dueling virtually anybody. But when he gets the champion's powers and he's capable of traversing massive stretches of land with Rivali's Gale, doing a spin attack and destroying an entire army with lightning, as if snapping his fingers, or reviving from the brink of death every 20 minutes, you realize that this Link has more in the way of defensive might than offensive might, which is absolutely terrifying because this guy can already destroy every single monster in Hyrule with ease. Notably, when he can also reflect any given attack back at an opponent without ever really stressing or pushing himself beyond the state of exhaustion, without ever really showing strain. And that, I think, is one of the really big parts that a lot of people don't necessarily get about this particular Link. Other Links like Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess have gambits and tools to help them out. And to be clear, the one witch slash, it's not witch, Great Fairy that doubled the armor of Link, effectively doubling all of his hearts, is an incredibly powerful boon. But you add into that the fact that the Twilight Princess Link has a tool like the Great Fairy, sorry, not like the Great Fairy Tears, but the Twilight Princess Link has access to the magic armor. Well, shoot, that's a pretty potent capability, isn't it? And reality is that this Link is capable of getting a 9,000, 10,000 rupee wallet. Of course he would be able to hold his own for an extended period of time. Every Link should have certain degrees of absurd power. But I think this Link, Breath of the Wild Link as a general statement, is the one that outdoes them all. Because reality is, every other Link has some limitation on how often he can do it, how long he can withstand certain onslaughts of attacks. And yes, the double-armored Link from Ocarina of Time, the fierce deity Link from Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker Link's magic armor, even the blue and red tunic and golden master sword version of Link from A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds are incredibly potent. But there's a limit to their power. There's a limit to their strength. There is a point in time where they can't go on. And to be clear, there is a point in time where this Link can't go on. But that point in time is very hard to hit. This Link can have, what is it, 20 to 999 fairies. This Link can have an absurd number of healing potions, items, food. He can have dozens upon hundreds of items to extend the length of time that he can battle. He has the champion's powers, which Mipha's Grace alone can heal him from death to full health every 20 minutes. That is an absurd level of strength. And we jump to another major test of strength, the Mozo Sheno Shrine. This one is in the Hebra Mountains, specifically underneath the Snowy Eagle. Now, the reason I wanted to come all the way up here is because reality is, I just needed something to kind of push me in the direction of completing a specific set of tasks. And I figured that if I came here, I would have those specific set of tasks planned out. But what about another version of Link? Which version of Link could best Breath of the Wild? Well, the only version I could see that would genuinely and consistently beat Breath of the Wild is Tears of the Kingdom. The Tears of the Kingdom Link brings every single tool and ability that Breath of the Wild Link has, minus the champion's powers, which admittedly does make the Tears of the Kingdom Link significantly weaker. The Tears of the Kingdom Link also is an engineer, which does make him incredibly more powerful in most circumstances. Anywho, now that we've gotten all that out of the way, I have to ask the question, if you could choose a Link, any Link, to be the bona fide most powerful version of your character, who would it be? And why do you think that? Now, the reason I want to ask that question is simply because, for me, I always gravitate towards specific Link. Notably the Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time Link. Partially because of their raw power, their physical strength. But there is so much more to these characters than I think meets the eye. That to dull it down to just how strong is this character in this particular circumstance does very little. It's very disingenuous. Because if I could ask you, well, which Link is the strongest, in what way? Are we talking raw physical muscle lifting, like powerlifting Link? In which case, the answer could be Twilight Princess for being able to haul around the ball and chain, stop goats with his raw physical strength on his own, or even box with a Goron. Sorry, sumo wrestle a Goron. These individuals are all, or these feats of strength are all incredible. But they're not as strong as some of the circumstances that come across due to, shall we say, item-assisted strength. Now, as far as item-assisted strength goes, my money goes directly to Ocarina of Time Link, and I don't even believe that it's remotely close. That Link has the capability to lift, haul, and throw entire sections of of granite and throw them at Mach speed across massive sections or massive areas. To me, that's just a no-brainer. That guy is raw power incarnate, and he is absurdly powerful for said action. But maybe you're looking at a more utility-based, in which case you might look more towards the 2D Links, or you might look towards the Majora's Mask Link, who has a more utility-based kit as well. Really, your choice of what kit your character gets is entirely dependent on your personal preferences of what a Link should be. I can't tell you that my choice of Link is better than yours, because reality is, it is subjective. Generally, our choice is going to reflect what we as an individual see ourselves in. I like the Twilight Princess Link, partially because of his maturity. I like the Twilight Princess Link because, as a character, he's the one who makes sacrifices for the people he cares about. He is the one who, when faced with a challenge that seems insurmountable, he'll turn around, he'll ask for help, sure, but he'll do so and then proceed to absolutely dominate anything and everything that came in his way to make sure that he gets exactly what he needs. Anywho, the reason I've had opted to come up towards the Heber Mountains, specifically to the underside of the Snowy Eagle, is because I have a side mission that I wanted to complete. A shrine that has been bothering me for a long time. See, there is a shrine in the Heber Mountains that is the Great Hebra Skeleton. And this particular shrine is incredibly powerful. Not powerful. This shrine is consistent. This shrine has always been one that I've known about and I can find rather easily. But it's one that I struggle to complete every time I get around to doing it. And the reason I struggle to complete it so much actually comes down to the fact that I am trying to complete it without necessarily having all of the tools necessary to complete it. Now, reality dictates that this particular shrine is meant to be beaten as you build up a snowball, you throw it down the mountain, and the snowball you build crashes into a door that opens up the Great Hebra skeleton. This is how it's supposed to be done. The problem is that if you don't have a snowball that's large enough to crash into this door, it won't do enough. It won't do anything. And this door is specifically programmed to be opened via that means. Therefore, while magnesis shenanigans usually does the trick, this is not one of those times that it works the way I would like. So my goal, whenever it comes around to this one, is to bring a steel object from somewhere nearby, typically the shield I would have on my back, drop it on the ground, and use it to manipulate a snowball to make it large enough that it could crash into the door and deal the damage I need it to deal. That is my general hope at how I'm dealing with this particular problem. But if you're an astute observer, you'll know that that's kind of difficult. Of course I want to do it in this specific way. Of course that's how it would work for me. What bothers me and what kind of gets me the most is that I want to do it quickly, concisely, and like a one and done type of problem. But it never feels like it's a one and done type solution. It is always that something goes wrong. See, the problem that I run into is that there is this little puddle, a small pond on the way down, that if you are slightly misaligned, your snowball that is meant to make it all the way down the hill just simply can't. And so you're left with, well, now what? What is my next solution? And I don't really know what the answer to that question should be. My general solution is just, oh, okay, cool, I've got to deal with this, I've got to deal with that. I'm going to create a couple of Cryonis pillars and hope that it lands just right. Oh, no, it didn't. I have to use something else to lift this thing out of the hole. I could use some of those, whatchamacallit. I think they're like octoguts? Octoballoons, that's the word. That lift up objects off the ground. I'm like, okay, I could do that. Like, that's not a problem. Theoretically. Note that I'd say that's not a problem on a regular basis. Using the mentality of, oh yeah, I can just quickly pick this up and roll it the rest of the way down the hill. Oh no, I dropped it and now it just blew up on the ground. I gotta start again. Well, I attempted to open up this door on 4 separate occasions. And I'm getting a little frustrated with it. Because I know it's possible. I know I've done it in more conventional means or without all the silliness that I typically do at some point before. I know I have. But doing it is only half of the battle. My goal in this particular circumstance, once this particular major test of strength is done, I'm gonna go and collect something made of metal. Could be a sword, could be a shield, a boomerang, a bow, something. And use that metal object to create a massive snowball to break down the Hebra door. Once I break down the Hebra door, that's it. The Great Skeleton Shrine is complete. It's just, for some odd reason, I run out of snowballs on a regular basis and can't finish that challenge before it's too late. So I kind of got a little frustrated with it. So I opting for more traditional means of dealing with the problem. Not traditional. more shenanigans. Because if you let somebody shenan once, they are going to shenan again. And personally, I like shenaniganizing. Anyways, with now our third major test of strength of the day completed, oofty smokes, that's a lot all at once, I have to say that I very much enjoy the combat. I do think that there's a lot there that could be done to really spice this up. But reality is I'm not sure what could be done. The limitations that I have imposed upon myself, the situations that I have caused to make this more difficult for my own needs, well, I kind of made that problem for myself. I kind of buggered that up for myself. I can't say that the issues I am struggling with, the problems that I have run into, trying to complete all of these tasks is the fault of the developers. Okay, that was rude, Octo. I believe that every single problem, every single concern I've been having is due to the fact that I'm not being smart about how I solve these problems. They stress intelligence. They stress the act of understanding and kind of building towards wisdom as the primary focus for this link. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think that a wisdom-based link is important. A wisdom or knowledge-based, a brains-based link. One who solves problems not with brute force or I can get away with this because I'm the hero of time is the way that I want this character to work. And so, me trying to break the game, trying to do challenges in ways they were never intended to, ironically makes this link more on the power or courage side than I think the developers intended this link to be. What in the world did you do there? Anywho, one thing I am running into, and this could very well be a me problem, is fighting most enemies. Once they reach a certain level of, difficulty, think the blue or black, typically I'm going to point to the black botws. Once they reach that black level, they become exponentially more difficult to defeat. Not because they're, all that much harder than other entities or anything of that nature, but because when I actually go about fighting them, they have better situational awareness. Now, I think that's a good thing. Enemies having a certain level of situational awareness is, in my opinion, an ideal. Of course I want them to have a certain level of, oh, I probably shouldn't step on the bomb there. But the problem is when I'm relying so heavily on it, it becomes difficult for me to actually approach these... Excuse me, where did that shield go? Did he just reset? Okay, cool. So, unfortunately for this lizard, he has chosen death. So, I was trying to, spare his life, because let's be reasonable about all of this. Link is a menace, but I don't want him to be that kind of menace, right? So, I've been almost launched him off a cliff. That would have been fun. Because Link is a menace and will always and forever be a menace, I'm trying to be cautious about how I go about things. And the Lizalfos and the monsters, which are created from black magic, in my opinion, get kind of poor rap in these games. Because they're intended to be incredibly strong entities. And here I am tossing him around like a rag doll. I personally like that. I like doing the ragdoll toss. Because these bosses, these enemies, these creatures are not actually flesh and blood beings, typically speaking. Hey, Icy Prime meat. Fantastic. We're just gonna, take a bite out of a slab of frozen meat as we run through the desert, and we'll be perfectly fine. It's almost like eating freezies in the desert. But these enemies that are designed around, we can protect ourselves and whatnot. The goal is typically to do things in a way that these enemies are able to hold their own and fight back against you. Typically. I don't think he's getting up from that, so now I'll steal your shield. Bye-bye. Now that I have the shield, we can continue to complete the task as I saw fit prior. Because he won't reset and steal his shield back from me. Why he reset in the first place, I have no idea. But we're going to make sure he doesn't do that again, that bugger. So, reality is that a lot of these enemies, I personally feel bad about beating up the way I do. Maybe it's just me. I am the type of person who doesn't really like to be the, point the finger and say haha type of guy. But these enemies that I'm facing off against, they're getting a really short end of the stick here. And that's, I think, by design. Because they are created as a construct of dark magic, the power of Ganondorf, they end up being... how do I want to word this? They end up getting treated as disposable. And they're disposable because they're recreated in an instant. There's nothing really holding them to the same level of consequence as some of the other characters. Now, if you were to say, oh yeah, Impa in Breath of the Wild is a disposable character, I would say absolutely not. Because Impa is this 120-year-old woman who is incredibly strong and incredibly well-versed in her old age. But she is also somebody who, without a shadow of a doubt, should be considered to be one of the most powerful entities in the entire Zelda game and franchise. There's a reason she's made it to 120 years old, and that she is one of Link's close confidants in this era. And it's because she is incredibly strong, incredibly capable, incredibly versatile. Link just happens to be more of a gremlin, and those that he fights become disposable because of course they're disposable. Why would something that is made to be a one-off enemy be anything other than? Now, it's not like the Yiga. The Yiga have this level of, I am trying to protect myself and those around me mentality, and they're not necessarily the best at it, to be clear. But for the most part, they tend to approach problems as the Yiga as, I'm going to fight you until I know I can't. And then they run away and regroup. They want to defeat Link, but they know they are finite in number. And if I'm being honest, I think that you actually fight the same 6 Giga Clan members 15 dozen times. I also have no idea how big the Yiga Clan is, because if you look at the Yiga Clan through the perspective of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they're reasonably numerous. But if you look at them from the lens of, Age of Calamity, they are incredibly more numerous than I had ever given them credit for. Is that accurate? Who knows? But it is also a Warriors game that Warriors games and Koei Tecmo's systems have a bit of a habit of, I'm going to make an army of these guys Be it skeletal warriors, be it bokos, be it what's it? There's the bokoblins, there's the bulbins, there's the hylian soldiers, you have all sorts of guys, right? All sorts of entities that fight as a bulk army. And these bulk armies are intended to be incredibly powerful. But the average entity, the ones that they use as your run-of-the-mill fighter, are typically treated with a, oh yeah, these guys exist kind of mentality. They aren't given the same level of care that the big heavy hitters are. There's only one Suga, there's only one Koga, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, of average Yiga. At least in that day and age. Anyways, we have made it to the Tokomo Shrine. And the Tokomo Shrine is, at last, the Hebra Skeleton Shrine completed. Now, to be clear, I love all of these combat trials. I love all of these more, shall we say, broken up sets of strength. Broken up sets of abilities and shrine styles. But my favorites are always going to be the ones that are more unique. Unfortunately, it feels like a lot of the shrines in Zelda as a whole kind of look back at these older shrines and say, oh yeah, I could do that, or I could do this, or I could do that. And I don't necessarily like that as a overarching solution to a lot of this, because reality dictates that these characters, these bosses, these entities are meant to be separate. And when you copy-paste shrines and their challenges, you end up having the game feel very formulaic. An example of my favorite shrines would be, what is it? There's one, my number one favorite shrine is Eventide Island. But you have the Three Brothers, where you have to find 3 separate Hinoxes and pull each of their Sheikah orbs off of their necklaces and guide it to the top of a mountain. You have guiding fire, you have all sorts of these rather unique approaches. You have the 3 mazes. And sure, the 3 mazes are a little on the formulaic side. You did it once, you did it twice, you've now done it 3 times, problem. But riddle me this. If it worked well, why stop? The 3 mazes, the three maze shrines are actually some of my absolute favorites, because these 3 mazes are intended to be exceptionally powerful battles. Not battles. They're meant to break convention. And they threw them in 3 areas where, under ordinary circumstances playing the game, the Eventide Island you will never have to go to. The farthest you will have to go towards in a standard run, assuming that you're going after all the divine beasts, you are expected to go through Zora's Domain, Kakariko Village, the Hateno Village. But Hateno's the farthest out that direction that you are expected to go. The Faron region to the south and Lake Hylia is not even expected that you are to go there. You're gonna head north to Zora's Domain and deal with the first of the divine beasts. Second, the Gorons. You're gonna probably end up going all the way to the Tabantha region for the Rito quest line, and then to Gerudo Desert. your choice of how to get to Gerudo Desert is either through the plains or central Hyrule, or through the Gerudo Highlands. Either way you look at it, you are approaching this from one of two effective angles. And then, maybe, you'll make your way north to the Lost Woods to find the Master Sword and finish the game. The Akala region, the Faerun region, and the Hebra region are completely optional by those, by that set of expectations. The Lake region, completely optional. And there is a possibility that the Gerudo Highlands are completely optional as far as what the average player would go through. Meaning that only about maybe 50% of all of the shrines are actually visible or easy enough to come across in a standard, if you were to play the game start to finish and only do what would be considered necessary. Only about half of the shrines would even be seen. And I do think that is kind of a unique circumstance. As a player, as an individual, I have to say that I do like when games approach design in a way that, yeah, you could go here, you could do that, you could do this. And a lot of the repetitive shrines do fall outside. Correction, a lot of them fall inside that region, shall we say. But a lot of my favorite ones fall out into the very far edges of the world map. And I think that is partially by design. They're pushing and incentivizing that the players of Breath of the Wild look at the game from every angle. They're looking at ways that the players can say, huh, what is that all the way out there? What is Eventide Island? What is that giant block of granite on the south end of the desert? And every single one of the shrines, excluding the 4 in the Great Plateau, are completely optional. Every one of the towers, except for the Great Plateau, is completely optional. Every single one of the Divine Beasts is completely optional. And is that, for me, that is something that is an incredible feat. That you can have not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 4, maybe even like up to 6 major collectibles in the game via completely optional side quest. You don't need the shrines. You don't need the Divine Beasts. Heck, you do not even need the Koroks. You don't need the armor. You don't need to complete anything, technically speaking. But you want to. You want to complete the map because it makes finding new areas easier. You want to complete the shrines because, of course, having more health and stamina will make traversing this vast land more easily, making various areas more readily accessible. Of course you want to defeat the Divine Beasts, because defeating the Divine Beasts and gaining these champions' powers is going to make a huge difference for your survivability out there. Of course you want to collect Koroks. Not necessarily that you want it to be Koroks, but that you want to collect their collectibles. Because collecting the things that tie into the Koroks mean that you, as a player, will be able to get whatever comes your way and have more slots for more weapons, more armor, more everything. It effectively means that you can do whatever it is you need to do with relative ease. Anywho, that's kind of it for my rant. Next time, I am intending on finishing off the last of the shrines that I am going to be completing for this entire run. And I'll be doing a little bit of a explanation on the ones that I can't complete and why. While we're explaining and talking about that, I will also be aiming to climb Hyrule Castle and really dive into finishing off the game properly. Because reality is, I want to showcase the end of this game. But I don't want to have to make 17 feature-length movies to make that happen. And I'll also admit that this will be the first time that I'm facing off against all of the blights in Hyrule Castle. I think every time I've done it, I've done each of the Divine Beasts separately because I've relied very heavily on the champion's powers to get around. Is that the way it should be? I don't know. But I will say that I love the fact that you can do anything and everything in Breath of the Wild. And if I could give this game a rating, oh yeah, this is my opinion, I would say that Breath of the Wild is one of those games that is a very rare, like 95 out of 100. Now, I'm going to be very honest. A perfect score is near impossible. And even games like Ocarina of Time, I won't give a perfect score to. And the reason I don't give out of why I wouldn't perfect score games is because, in my opinion, there is no such thing as a perfect game. There are games with an intent that have incredible stories, incredible reasons behind everything that happens in the game. But those games are often few and far between. And one thing that I will say is that replayability is part of my kind of scoring system. Generally speaking, if I were to rank a game, I would grant, let's say, out of 10. My general rule of thumb would be, is the game playable, first and foremost? And that to me seems really simple. Is it going to crash on a regular basis? Yes or no? If yes, it loses a point. If no, congratulations, you just gained yourself a point for having a game that works. Is this a game that I want to finish? Yes or no? If yes, it gains a point. And that's another really simple one. Is this a game I want to complete? Yes or no? Completion for me is a guideline on how much I enjoy the systems of the game. Does this game have any level of depth? Again, yes or no? I don't want to be the guy who says, oh yeah, this game is incredibly in-depth and then not have anything to show for it. But more on that system and what's coming up next week as we finish off Zelda Breath of the Wild Minimum Weapons Run. Until next time, I hope you have a good one.